Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced PHP with MySQL course. In today's lesson, we're going to be continuing development of our web application, incorporating what we learned in our last lesson about joins. We're going to go through two different versions of the web application in this lesson. We're going to have a version 19.0 and a 19.1, which are going to do a couple of different things. Before we get into those, we're going to cover the topic of inserting orders in our database. Because as we learned in our last lesson, if you've done the required homework to set up your database to be able to handle orders, we have information of orders spread over multiple tables: orders, customers table, and orders items table. So basically, because when we create an order, we have information for that order stored in multiple tables, we actually have to have multiple insert statements in order to do that. So for example, when we create an order, a user submits all the information about all the items in their cart and the quantities, and then they submit customer information, and then in our orders table we store date, time, stamp, and so forth. Well, basically the first insert we're going to do is an insert into the customers table. Basically what we're going to be doing is creating a database access, another method called insert order, which is going to basically perform the insert, all the inserts that are needed to update all the different tables for a particular order. The first one it's going to do is insert customers. The reason for that is it needs to be able to generate a customer ID for a particular customer, because then when you go ahead and we insert into the second insert we're going to do is into the orders table, and that's because our orders table is structured order ID, date, time, ordered, tax rate, and then customer ID. So in order to input all of this information, we need to have an insert into the customers table first to figure out the ID of a particular customer. Then we're going to insert information about the order, which is going to include a date timestamp, which we're going to generate using the PHP date function. Tax rate is something that's going to be set, it's going to be a static value. And then once we've done that, then we need to add all of the items associated with the order into the orders items table. So then we're going to perform one or more inserts into the orders items linking table, which again links an order ID with an item ID, and then has columns for the quantity of that item in that order and the price of that item at the time the order was made. So basically we're going to have one insert statement for the customers table, we're going to have one insert statement for our orders table, and then we're going to have one-to-many inserts into the orders items table depending on how many items, and there'll be an insert here for each item in the store. So each item in the order. So if there were 3 items in the order, we'd have 3 inserts into our orders items linking table. And so that's sort of the process that's going to be involved for ordering an item. So as mentioned, we were going to be creating in version 19.0, we're going to be adding a method called insert order into our database access class. And basically what that's going to do is that's going to replace in checkout.php, whereas before we were running an email, or we were calling an email order function to email the orders information to the store administrator. Now we're going to be storing it in the database, so we're going to replace that call to email order with the call to this insert order function. And if we take a quick look at just the function prototype for the insert order function, actually it's better to look at it here. We can see that for insert order, we're actually passing it 3 different variables. We're going to pass it a cart variable, which is our shopping cart, and that's going to be basically the status of the user shopping cart when they're ready to check out. So it's going to contain an array of all of the cart item objects, which contains the price and information. That contains the quantity of each item and then information about each item. We're going to pass it a customer object, which is something that in checkout.php we already have been building up from the information a user submitted on the checkout.php form. And then we're also going to be passing it the tax rate, which would be, we're just going to be passing it the constant sales tax rate that we have set up. But that may change over time. Maybe we change our configuration file to, right now it's at 10%, maybe we change the tax rate to 9%. Well, that way when we call this method, we can set the tax rate. So when we insert our order into the database, not only is it going to have the customer data, it's going to have information about all the items and their prices at the current time, but it's also going to have the tax rate that was used at the time of that order. And so that way we can recalculate that total down the road when we want to look up orders in the database. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to build up this insert order method. It's going to build up an order object, which is just like a customer object or our item or department object. It basically is an object that represents the data of an order. So if we take a look at the order class, we can see it has a couple of properties. It has an order ID property, which is the unique primary key ID of a particular order. It's going to have a string that's going to represent the date and time stamp that the order was made. It's going to have a float field, which is going to be the tax rate associated with the order. It's going to have a customer ID string, which is going to be that foreign key that's going to link an order to a customer in the customers table. And then it's also going to have an array, an indexed array of what we're going to call order item objects. And basically, what that is there's going to be one order item object created in this array property of the order object of the order class for each item that's in the cart. Basically, what an order item is, it's kind of like a cart item object that we had been using before. Is an order item. It basically represents a row in the ordered items table. So it has the order ID that this order item object is referring to. It has the item ID that it's referring to. So basically between those two it's going to say this is the item and this is the particular order that it's in. And then in our order items table we also have a price and quantity associated with the item in that order. So that's going to have fields for a float field for price and then an integer field for quantity. So that's going to sort of represent all of those rows in our items table. So basically that order object is going to contain all the information in the orders table as fields. It's going to contain a link to, it's going to contain the customer ID, which is going to be the ID of the customer that the order was made, that made the order, and then it's going to contain an array of all of the different order items. What we're going to do in our insert order method is basically build up this object. After we've inserted the order information into these three different tables, we return that order object, assuming there's no error, in which case we would return false. So if we actually go and look at our insert order method, we can see what we learned about on the last page, that the insert order into the database is going to involve multiple insert statements. We can see that it takes a shopping cart object, a customer object, and a tax rate. And basically, the first thing it does, as we just learned, was it's going to insert a row into the customer's database. So it's going to take this customer object that was passed in, and it's going to insert it into the customer's database. The way that's done is we've actually created another method within this database access class called insert customer, which works just like our insert item, basically like our insert item class. It just takes that customer object and then basically forms an insert query and puts it in the insert table. So it's the same standard procedure we've been doing for inserting, for example, an item into the items table, except now we're going to be inserting a customer object into the customer table. And when it's successful, we return the updated customer object with the customer ID that was generated by the auto increment column of that particular table. So the first step we do is we insert the customer. Assuming that goes okay, we move on to the next part, which is going to be our second insert, which is going to be an insert into the orders table. And so basically what we're doing is we start off by building up an order object that we had just talked about. And because its first property is an order ID, we set that equal to null because we don't know the order ID until we've inserted it yet. Then you can see here, well, basically, actually, let's look at the order constructor. The order constructor takes these parameters in this order. It takes the order ID, a string for the date and time ordered, the tax rate, a string for the customer ID for the customer, and then the array of the ordered items. So we can see here that the second one is a call to the date function, and basically what that's going to do is that's going to generate our timestamp for this particular order. So when this order object is created, this is going to create the timestamp. We've actually created a constant in this database access class called date format, and if we look at the constant summary for this particular class, we can see that this is a date format string, and basically what that does is that allows us to properly format the string for MySQL to be able to interpret it when we try to insert it. This basically signifies 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 2-digit hour, 2-digit minute, and 2-digit seconds. And so that way when we go to insert it in the database, MySQL will be able to understand that string. So then after we built up this order object, we're going to create an insert statement for the orders table. And what we're going to do is just take information that we've just included in this new order object, use the sprintf function to create that order statement, go ahead and insert that into the table. Assuming there's no problems, we go ahead and we update the order object with the insert ID that was generated for it. And so now we've got our customer in the customers table, we've got our row in the orders table. Now all we need to do is basically loop over all of the different items that were in the order and create rows in the ordered items table. Well, we've passed a shopping cart object to this particular method, and so what we're going to do is we're basically going to loop over all of the items in that particular cart and then extract the information we need to create an order item object, and we're going to build up this order items array. And so basically what we're extracting is, for each order item, we're including the order ID that we had just generated for the order row that we just added to the orders table. For the item ID part of the order item, we're going to pull the item ID from the item object that's in the cart item object that's in our shopping cart. Likewise, we're going to pull the quantity for that particular item out of the cart item object, and then we're going to pull the price for the item out of the item object that's in the cart item object that's in the cart. So it gets a little bit complicated with objects referring to objects and so forth. Basically what we're doing is we're building up this order item object that contains the a reference to the order ID, the item that's in the order, and then the price and quantity of that item when the order was made. We add that for each item in our cart, so we're going to loop over the cart, and we build up that order items array. Then basically what we're going to do is we're going to loop over that array and basically run an insert statement into the order items table representing each of those order item objects. So for every item that we have in our shopping cart, there's going to be an insert into the orders items table. So we loop over that ordered items array. Assuming we don't have any problems, we go ahead and we update our order object with that array of ordered items, and then we return it to the user so that they can pull information that they might need from that. And so the place that actually uses this is checkout.php, as mentioned. So if we go and look at checkout.php, in our previous version of checkout.php, when the user would submit a form with the complete order action, it would build up a customer object, it would validate the customer, and then it would call this email order function, which would pass along the shopping cart, which contains all the information about all the items and the prices and the quantities, and then the customer object, which contains information about the customer, and that would return the date timestamp. Well, now what we're doing is we're going to be replacing that. We still build up a customer object, we still validate the customer, except now we're going to be calling on our database access object, we're going to be calling this insert order function that we just learned about. We're going to pass it the shopping cart with all the information in the cart that's trying to be completed. We're going to pass it the customer information, and we're also going to pass it the sales tax rate used for this order, which in this particular case is our constant sales tax rate. As we just learned, insert order returns a built-up order object, assuming it was successful. And so what we can do is on that object we can pull the date time ordered property out of that object, which is that date timestamp that we generated using the date function in PHP, and we can set our order date time equal to that. And so the rest of the script is basically going to work the same way. Here we had order date time that was set from email order, and then what it does is it goes ahead and it processes the rest of the script and outputs a thank you message that shows the current date and time, the current total, and so forth. Now, one other thing to note about our order and order item classes is, like cart and cart item, there's a way to calculate the total for a particular order, because as we had mentioned in the last lesson, when we have an order in the database, we don't include a column for total for the order, because that's something that we can calculate. And so if we already have all that information in the database, there's no need to store it in there, because we can calculate it. It wastes space. So the way we've set up, the method that's been set up to do that is each order item object has a calc order item total, just like we had calc cart item total, and basically it just multiplies the quantity of the item in the cart times its price to give you that the price due to that quantity. And then in our order class, it simply loops over all of the order items objects that are in its order items array. And in calc order total, it loops over those order items, basically adds up a subtotal by calling that calc order item total method on each order item object, and then it simply multiplies that using 1 plus the tax rate to get the total including tax. It rounds it off and then it returns that, and that's a way that we're going to be able to in the future, and we're going to see that in a little bit, to be able to calculate an order total in the future when we look up an order in the database. These are the methods that we're going to use to do that. So if we look at version 19.0, which is our version of the current version of the web store, and if we go ahead and we create a shopping cart, add a couple of items to it. Maybe we'll add 2 t-shirts. Maybe we're going to add a DVD player to the cart. Now when we go to checkout, our new checkout PHP script is going to run. So instead of emailing the order, it's going to insert it into the database. So if we go ahead and submit this order, oops, and go complete order, it's going to insert it into the database. We're going to see this timestamp that we were generated. It's going to tell us the order like before. It's going to be able to echo the customer information. And now if we actually go to our MySQL monitor, we can look up the information in these orders tables, order items table, and customer table to verify and see that it was actually added to our database. So now if we run select star on our orders table, which we created in the last required homework, we can see that there's one order in the table, which is the order we just created. It has order ID 1. This was the date and time stamp of when it was ordered. The tax rate at the time was 10%, and it was associated with customer ID number 1. So if we actually go and look up our information in our customers table, we can see that, and let me restrict that a little bit. We can see that there's one row in our customer table. It's Joe Smith. It has customer ID 1, and we can see that's what links this order, the row in our order table, to the row in the customer ID table. Now we added 2 items to our particular cart, so we should have 2 rows in our order items linking table. So if we see all the rows in our order items table, we can see there's 2 entries. It says that item 1001 was associated with order ID 1. It had a quantity 2. The price of the item when that order was placed was $15. And then we can also see that associated with order 1 was item 1005, which was the DVD player. We only added one of those, and its price was $79.99. So as you can see, this insert order function or method has gone ahead and updated our orders table, our customers table, and our order items table to have all of that information in our database via one method. So, for example, what we're going to be showing in the next version is how we're actually going to view these orders. And what we learned in our last lesson was about joins. So let's say we want to pull for our order ID. For our order, we want to pull the date and time of the order and the customer name. Well, we can use a join query to do that. That we learned about in our last lesson. So we're saying select the order ID from the orders table, the first name and last name from the customers table, from the orders table with an alias of as O, and we're going to have that table interjoined with the customers table with an alias of C, and the condition is where the customer ID of our orders table equals the customer ID of our customers table. And we can see that by this join query, we can pull information about this order and find out that, okay, Joe Smith was the one that ordered order ID number 1. And so that's how we're going to make use of our inner join query in our next version of the application, which we're going to talk about now. So basically, in 19.1 is we've already implemented the method to insert an order to a table. What 19.1 does is it adds an admin page or 2 admin pages to our administrative interface that's going to allow us to view all of the orders that have been added to the store, so orders that have been made. It's going to do that by a couple of different functions that we're going to add to our database access class. We have a get order function, which is going to allow us to pull all the information from those 3 tables to basically build up an order object to extract all that information. We have a get orders function, which is going to allow us to pull an array of all of the orders in the database. And there's also a get customer function that we're going to be creating to use in these methods to pull information from the customer table. Our get order function, because it's pulling information from our orders table and our customers table, as we just saw, it's going to make use of an inner join query, and that's going to allow it to retrieve information from both orders and customers in a single result set. So that's sort of the key method that we've added here is get order. So let's take a look at that. Oops, I'm on the wrong version, that's why. Couldn't find it. So if we look at our database access class in version 19.1, we can see the get order function. And if we go and take a look at that, it's like our get item or get department function. It takes an ID of a particular order. It takes an order ID to look it up. And basically what you can see here is we have a select query that is an inner join query. It's a join query that joins the orders table and the customers table. And basically what we're pulling up is the ID of the order, the date and time it was ordered, the tax rate. We're pulling that from the orders table. We're pulling all of the information from the customers table, and we do that with c.star, and C is an alias for our customers table. Star says pull all of the columns from the customers table. And we're saying from the orders table, alias as lowercase 0, joined with the customers table, who has an alias of C, and we're joining them on the condition. So we join those 2 tables. It's going to be a combination of all those rows, but we're saying only give us the rows where the customer ID of the orders table matches the customer ID of the customers table, and because we only want the rows, we don't just want the join of all of the different rows that match up, we also want it for a specific order. We're saying also where the order ID of our orders table equals the order ID passed in. So that's going to give us a result set that's going to have all of these different columns and allow us to basically build up an order object. So we go ahead and we run this select query. We save the row in using the fetch object method from the result set as order customer row. And then what we do, assuming that there was at least assuming that there wasn't an error in returning the rows, we should receive 1 row back. Then what we need to do is we also need to build up an order object. We need to get all of the information from our order items table. So we have another select query that's going to pull all the columns from the ordered items table that has the order ID equal to that, which was passed into here. Basically what we do is we run that query and generate a result set, and then we're going to return an order object that is built using this built order from rows. It's a private helper function that takes the row returned from our original select query that was a join query from the customers and orders table, and then also the result set that's going to contain all the rows from orders items for a particular order. And it's going to build up that object and return it. In fact, so if we look at the source code, we can see that private method. Basically what it does is it loops over all of the results from the orders items query, builds up an order item for each one of those, and adds it to an array. And then we simply build up an order object containing information obtained from the original select query, join query. It's contained in this order customer row, and then we simply add to that constructor this items array that we've built up of all the different order items. And so what that's going to allow us to do is when we're going to have a script that we're going to see in a minute called view order. It's going to call this get order function, and it's going to return this order object, and we're going to be able to pull information about the order from that. Now we also have the get orders function, and simply what that does is that runs a select query on the orders table and says give me the order ID for all the orders in the table. Assuming that there's at least one order in the table, what it does is it basically just builds up an array of order objects by running that get order function again for each order. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like on our administrative website. We can see that we have all the same links as before. We've added a new link called View Orders. And actually, before I do this, let me add one more, add a little more data to our database. Let's add another order. So now we're going to have two orders in our database. When we go to our administrator website, we can click on this View Orders link, and what that's going to do is call that Get Orders function. And we can see that what this script does is after it calls Get Orders, it's able to parse all the order information in there and output this table that says these are the orders that are currently in our database. There's one order that was placed at this time. This was its total, and it calculates that total using the order object calc order total function that we had talked about. And we can see that there was another order placed here. And then the actual order ID links to a detail page about the particular order. Before we look at that, we can look at vieworders.php. What it does up here in the beginning section, in the data processing section, it loads all of the orders from the database using the getOrders function. And then simply it generates a table in the output section where it loops over each of the different orders and then outputs a link to the view order page for that particular order, outputs the date and time it was ordered, and then it outputs the total, which is calculated from the calc order total function. Now our view order class, when we actually click on one of these links, for example, let's click on order 2, it provides details about that order. We can see order ID 2 was ordered on this date, this was its total, and it contained item 1006 of quantity 1 at price $34.99. Likewise, if we do for order 1, where we had 2 items, we can see that item 1001 was contained in it twice. The price when it was ordered was $15, and it was $79.99. And basically, our view order class, it gets passed an order ID of the order to view. It loads it up from the database using that get order function, and then it simply just outputs a table that contains all of that information that we just saw about the particular order. And so that's how the view orders and view order scripts work. So now we are able to add orders to our database, and then from the administrative side, go ahead and look at the different orders that are available. So that ends today's lesson. Thank you for watching Educator.com. I look forward to seeing you next time.